Hey guys, how you doing? It's me, Ender, and today, well, we've got quite a special video. Those in my server will know that a few weeks back I hosted a game jam, and I said I'd do a video on it. This is that video. If you aren't aware, then let me explain some of the things about the game jam. Firstly, it was conducted over a weekend, meaning everyone had effectively 48 hours to make a game. Second of all, the game needed to have at least some effort put into it. This was to ensure that the second part of the whole event ended up being good. What is that part, you might ask? Well, simple. I will be judging each of the games through a bracket to find out which is the best. Out of all 10 games, what really takes the cake? Let's find out. But before we can do that, we should probably hear about all the games first. Roll the footage! Let me quickly explain each of the 10 games and give you a good idea of what each is like. Go! Starting off with Pumpkin Patch, a game about a pumpkin. This game features a variety of different mechanics like a flashlight, a candy thing, and a skeleton you gotta click on. It's overall pretty fun and challenging and is very, very well polished. The art in this game is really good, I'll admit that. Although the game feels very aimless in my opinion. I get the game was made in 2 days, but the fact that there's no sort of goal or anything just drains my motivation to play. Reunited, a game about, well, something. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Like Pumpkin Patch, Reunited features a variety of different mechanics, although it is a lot more buggy in my opinion. There's a reset panel thingy, a camera system where there's no map, but instead a button to switch between cameras. Oh yeah, and there's also doors that you can close on the cameras themselves. The game feels very slow paced, and the art is pretty weird. To be fair though, with some more time, effort, and polish, this game could have been a lot better. In the future, I'd recommend doing more bug fixing. Twisted Minds. Good art, but barely any gameplay. The whole game relies on a singular mechanic, a door, that you close whenever the animatronic appears. That's really it. There's really nothing else to it. There is a camera, but it's functionally useless. The art and the animation are pretty good in this game, but that's pretty much all that's going for it. 3 minutes with cringe. As the name suggests, this is the epitome of a joke game. The mechanics are decent, but could be better. There are 2 mechanics I know of, event you need to shut, and another one I haven't really figured out because this guy just kills me every single time. The art and gameplay could be improved, needless to say. Survival of Ratty. This game seems fairly polished, with most parts of the game having pretty good art. I say most because the cameras look amazing, while the office looks a little There's very few mechanics though, and only one character. The character himself contrasts the whole feeling of the location pretty well, as the cameras showed this happy, amazing place, but then the rat here is just ominously staring. There's some bugs and issues, but not very many. Overall, good, but could be better. Nightmare at Blues. I honestly do really like this game. While at first glance it might seem a little plain, it has a lot of variety in mechanics, like a camera, a motion sensor, and a device where you can literally hear into certain rooms. While I do question the functionality and usefulness of some of these mechanics, it is nonetheless quite nice. Besides that, and the fact that the game is pretty polished, the rest seems a little bland. Two Nights at Kirby's. This is where the line between a game jam game and a regular game become a bit fuzzy. The game feels like a full game, although it very clearly isn't one. Mechanics are, well, interesting to say the least, having your average motion tracker, but also a sort of, I assume, Among Us inspired mechanic that I'm not really entirely sure how to describe. The animation and art is also great, however, since this game is so polished, however lacks a lot of detail and features a full game would usually have, it gives off this weird aura that makes playing the game feel a little weird, at least to me. One Night at Bob's. This game is, how do I put it? Well, it seems like the developer tried their best. The game itself is very limited and somewhat buggy, and I'm sure with more time and polishing, this could have been at least a little more salvageable. No offense to the developer themselves, but, well, I'm not really known for sugarcoating reviews of any kind. So, Fight at the Pandas. This is a game in which a lot of creativity was definitely put into. The story is about some kind of time loop you're stuck in, has a satanic atmosphere, which seems pretty cool, and on top of that, the gameplay is pretty nice. It's a bit buggy though, won't lie. Their Night with You. This is the final game and, well actually it's not really even a game. It's not functional in almost any capacity with all the mechanics being broken. I don't think this is going to get very far in the competition. Not much to talk about here. Alrighty, so those are all the games briefly summarized. If you want a better understanding of each game though, just play them yourselves. Links will be in the description. Anyway, let's begin. So here we have the bracket. There's a few rounds here, and we'll be going on until we have the top 2 games listed. The winning creator will get a mini review on one of their games. Anyway, Let the battles commence. Oh yeah, and if you're wondering why there's some three-way rounds, it's because some of the space issues, but anyway, let's begin. Now, let's begin with the very first match, consisting of 3 games. 5 Nights at Pandas, 3 Minutes with Cringe, and Reunited. First, we should discuss each of the game's strengths and weaknesses. 5 Nights at Pandas has decent mechanics, a nice and unique setting, but a few bugs. 3 Minutes with Cringe has... well, it's a game. Reunited has cool mechanics, some bugs, but it's overall fun. So we can already tell that a common issue in the games is the glitches themselves, meaning that we can't really judge anything off of that since all the games have them, so we'll have to look to other categories to figure out which game is better. Art in all these games is relatively although with Pandas taking the lead only by a small margin. The gameplay is varied through all of them, although 3 Minutes with Cringe effectively has the worst in this part. In fact, let's just entirely boot off 3 Minutes with Cringe. It lacks the most in pretty much all of the important categories of what an actually good game is. So it makes sense to me to do that. So now we have Reunited versus 5 Nights at Pandas. Let's start with Reunited. The game is decent with some functioning mechanics, although these mechanics aren't necessarily fun to play with. Actually, all the mechanics are quite convoluted and unnecessarily tangled up. Meanwhile, with 5 Nights at Pandas, we actually have a very similar situation, although the game feels a little more polished. Well, not necessarily polished, but more I just like the atmosphere of the game better. In all honesty though, I feel like giving the dub to Pandas, but only by a small amount. These games come really close together, but this one hits the mark just a little more. What a tough battle though, just for the first round. 5 Nights at Pandas moves on to the middle matches. 3 Minutes with Cringe and Reunited do not. Next, for the second match, we have Pumpkin Patch and Their Night with You. Needless to say, I think the winner is a bit obvious. I mean, Pumpkin Patch is a game with various mechanics all blended well together, a colorful cast of characters, and good art overall, and on top of that, the gameplay is really challenging. The amount of detail and care put into this game is just amazing, really. Although it suffers from a few issues, mainly the gameplay feeling drawn out at some points during the game. On the flip side though, we have Their Night with You, which struggles to even get a single mechanic to work. Plus, the art for Their Night with You is a bit mediocre. There's little to no atmosphere even built up at all. Sorry to whoever made Their Night with You, but, well, it really just doesn't hit the cut. Pumpkin Patch moves on to the middle matches. Their Night with You does not. Match numero, 3, I guess? For the third match, we have Twisted Nights going against 2 Nights at Kirby's. On the surface, both of these games look fantastic, although going in, their issues become a lot more apparent. Figuring out which game has less of these issues is key in deciding a winner. So, let's start with Twisted Minds. Twisted Minds is a very polished, very good-looking game. There is no doubt about that. The art, the animation, and the gameplay feel very slick and professional. The problem is, well, the lack of gameplay itself. Polished gameplay doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a lot of gameplay, and Twisted Minds particularly lacks in any real gameplay. Its only 2 mechanics are a door and a power meter, with a camera that really has no use at all. This leaves the game feeling extremely plain and boring after only a few playthroughs. Actually, not even playthroughs, just a few minutes in general. Next, we have 2 Nights at Kirby's. The game's art isn't at the same level, although don't get me wrong, it is still very good. The game is also pretty polished, although the art choices, for some places at least, are a bit questionable. My main gripe with this game is just how small it feels, as the motion detector makes the whole location feel a lot smaller than it probably is, but this is just an opinion of mine. Unlike Twisted Minds though, the game features a variety of different mechanics, making the game more fun, and in turn the winner of this match. No matter how good your art is, if the game is lacking, then the game isn't going to be too good. 2 Nights at Kirby's moves on to the middle matches. Twisted Minds does not. And now, the final match of the starting round. This is another 3-way match consisting of The Nightmare at Blues, Survival at Ratty's, and One Night at Bob's. Let's discuss the games first. Nightmare at Blues. This game has many ways to monitor the map, having a camera, a motion detector, and even this whole sad listener thingy. The art is good, but the actual gameplay is lacking, since to make the animatronic go away, all you gotta do is press a single button and that's that. Survival of Ratty. This game is fairly similar to Nightmare Blues, only having one thing you have to do to make the animatronic go away. Except the difference is, instead of having many ways to look around the map, there's only one. The actual cameras though are honestly fantastic and have tons of detail. Finally, we have One Night at Bob's. Well, as I said, at least the developer tried. There's barely any content, and the content in this game that actually is in the game barely works. Making all this known, I think we can easily take off One Night at Bob's off the list. The difference in quality between Nightmare Blues and Survival of Ratty compared to One Hit Bob's is just too drastic. It really does not make the cut in the slightest. Now we have Nightmare Blues and Survival of Ratty left. The issue here is, both of the games are extremely similar. One mechanic to get the animatronic away, one animatronic in general. The only differences to be found is how you monitor the building. As I said, Blues has 3 different ways to check them out, while Ratty's only has 1. How do we judge 2 games that are pretty much the same? Well, if we can't use gameplay as a factor, then we must use art. Survival of Ratty's clearly has the superior art, I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Now, I'm not saying Nightmare Blues is bad in the art department, but when the floors on the cameras are crystal clean and actually have reflections, you know the art in this game is good. And besides, more mechanics doesn't mean more fun anyway. Tough match. Survival of Ratty moves on to the middle matches. One Hit Bob's and Nightmare Blues do not. Phew, that was tough. Honestly, I felt a little bad having to choose which games go on and which don't, seeing as a lot of the games were pretty good, but, well, I gotta judge fairly. But hey, guess what time it is? Round 2! Nah, just kidding. Intermission time! Take this time to pause the video, grab a cup of tea maybe, or if you're like me, go to the basement to get something and see 2 giant cockroaches grunt out somewhere while the lights were out. Intermission over. Round 2, let's begin. As you can see, we have half as many matches here. Let's see what the 2 games that move on to the finals are. Starting off with the very first match, we have Fighting the Pandas and the Pumpkin Patch. I've stated these games' ups and downs numerous times already, so I don't think it's necessary here at this point. Let's just dive right in. Fighting the Pandas and the Pumpkin Patch are both very different games, and it becomes clear immediately what game is the best in most categories. Fighting the Pandas' lack of bug fixing and art polishing makes it, frankly, not as good as Pumpkin Patch. The real thing in favor of this game, though, is its unique plot. Pumpkin Patch seemingly has none, so it makes the whole game feel pointless. Yes, you're trying to survive, but who cares? There's really no explanation at all. Plot, however, is mostly unimportant here, as the gameplay matters most. Pumpkin Patch's polish and mechanics make it feel not necessarily more complete than Pandas, but a lot more functional. There's many mechanics, and at this point, I don't even think I've found a single glitch. All of these mechanics themselves are useful in their own way, although the final result may be a bit convoluted. Pandas sort of has this, but with a severe lack of polish in comparison to Pumpkin Patch, it really just doesn't hold up too well. The art and gameplay really could have gotten some work done on them. The Pumpkin Patch moves on to the finals. Fighting the Pandas does not. Match 2 and the final one of the middle round. Two Units at Kirby's versus Survival of Ratty. Two Units at Kirby's and Survival of Ratty are very different in how their developers handle them, and that in turn affects how the games turned out. Two Nights at Kirby's is very much a game that doesn't take itself seriously. You can tell by all the random references and memes sprinkled throughout the game. On the other hand, Ratty's is the complete opposite, where it seemingly builds up a kind of lore, or at the very least an atmosphere present throughout the whole game. Now, normally I'd be inclined to vote Ratty's as the better game here, simply because I just prefer more quote-unquote serious games rather than jokes, but in this case, the situation is a lot more complicated than just joke game versus serious game. And the reason why I say this is, well, Kirby's is honestly a lot more fleshed out than you usually assume of a joke game. There's 5 full nights, despite the fact that the title is 2 nights, but whatever. There's genuinely good models, an actual ending thingy to the whole game, and overall it's very well polished. The difference between these games is, well, not as big as you'd usually assume at first glance. Let's discuss Survival of Ratty. The game is, well, to put it bluntly, good. And I mean, that's why it's gone this far. The main catalyst here is the fantastic art and the shiny floors. As for that gameplay, well, it's smooth with only a few bugs and issues. I think my main gripe here, and the one that really hurts this game, is the fact that the whole game is limited to one mechanic. I think it's very obvious when a dev focuses on art rather than gameplay, and this was definitely a case here. The art here is phenomenal, but the presentation of the gameplay is, well, it's not poor, but it's not that great either. Mediocre. And because of that lack of gameplay compared to Kirby's, Survival of Ratty is going to have to bite the dust. Don't feel bad, Ratty. You made it pretty far. Two Nights at Kirby's moves on to the finals. Survival of Ratty does not. Phew, another tough battle. You know, I was genuinely inclined to let Survival of Ratty win, but after replaying both games, it became clear which game really deserved to move on. Not that Ratty's didn't, but, well, I'm running a competition here. There isn't gonna be 2 winners, is there? Oh yeah, and, that was the end of the middle matches. Time to go to the final. Nah, I'm pulling this joke again. Intermission time! Take this time to pause the video. Work on your Scratch game a bit. get another cup of tea, or just do whatever you feel. Intermission over. Round 3, the finals. Any game that has gotten to this point has proven themselves worthy of being here, and could even beat the other game and be the winner of this whole competition. Here we have Pumpkin Patch versus Two Nights at Kirby's. Both products of 48 hours of hard work and effort. But there can only be one winner. Let's see which is better, and finally end this competition. Oh boy, where do we even begin? I think I've explained in previous rounds why these games work. They've got good mechanics, have barely any bugs, and present themselves as high quality projects. Picking apart these two will be especially difficult. Let's start with gameplay. Starting with Pumpkin Patch, I made it clear that the gameplay is good. There's plenty of mechanics, all with variety. These individual mechanics have literally no bugs, at least what I've seen, and it all plays very well. My main few gripes with the gameplay here would be the lack of diversity in mechanics. Yes, they're all separate from one another, and no mechanic is the same as another for the most part, but the mechanics themselves aren't that unique, it just seems more of the same here. Plus, those same mechanics are also very repetitive, and while I won't lie, a game will obviously need some repetition, the game does little to try and alleviate this factor in any way, shape, or form. I know these games are crammed out in 48 hours, but these are the best of the best. I expect a little more. Next we have Kirby's, which has a very different approach to gameplay. Unlike Pumpkin Patch, the mechanics aren't all unique from each other, with some acting in very similar ways, just with different doorways to go through. Unlike Pumpkin Patch, though, the game has a good enough atmosphere, at least in my opinion, to counteract this. The progressively harder nights takes off your focus from the mostly copy and pasted animatronics. My main issues with the gameplay is just how small this game feels. It's obviously not actually that small because, well, it's gotten this far, but the whole motion detector thing and the fact that it only takes up 60% of the screen makes the location feel much smaller than it probably is. As for art, I don't think there needs to be much discussion here. Pumpkin Patch easily wins here, no questions asked. There's just more detail in the art. Although, remember again, art isn't as important as gameplay and content. Well, at this point, the only way to truly measure if either game is better is just how fun it was for me personally, and how much gameplay there is and if the gameplay fits well. Honestly, I don't think there's any other way to continue this than by talking about my experiences. And honestly, I found Kirby's a lot more fun than Pumpkin Patch overall. Sure, Pumpkin Patch had some good moments, but everything always felt a bit forced. The mechanics aren't unique, and the game is, overall, just not very memorable. Kirby's, on the other hand, well, some nights were good, others were a bit boring, but the game seemed more memorable to me. And to be fair, Kirby's has a lot more content than Pumpkin Patch ever did. I mean, 5 nights in a custom night is definitely saying something. So, through all these comparisons, what game do I personally think is the best? Well, it has to be Kirby's. More gameplay, more content, more everything. And all the while, the game mostly stayed together, it didn't feel too disconnected. Two Nights at Kirby's is the winner. Pumpkin Patch, sadly, is not, and has to settle for second place. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it. Kirby's is officially the winner of this contest. Out of the 10 games submitted, this is definitely the one that beat the rest. The true winner of the game jam that I held in my server. Congratulations to Mega Mario Kirby 3451, otherwise known as Bubbled. I hope all the contestants had a lot of fun being in this competition. Go check out Bubbled, follow his account, play his games, and whatever. I'll be following him myself since he did win. Expect a potential mini review on one of his games coming up eventually. But well, that is the end of the video. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed this, and I don't have too much else to say. See ya.